Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this short presentation about STEM, the EYLF and intentional teaching. Before introducing the team, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. My name's Kevin Larkin, and I'm speaking to you today from Yugambeh country on the Gold Coast. I'd invite now Tracy and Ross just to introduce themselves as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy, part of the ELSA team, and I'm joining you today from Ngunnawal country.
Hi, I'm Ross, Communications Manager for ELSA at University of Canberra. I'll be in the chat as well today if you have any questions as we go.
Thanks, Ross and Tracy, and thanks for joining us today. So we'd like to take roughly 20 to 25 minutes just to talk to you today about something that we think is really important in preschool centres, and that is STEM. So our experiences on the ELSA project over the last 7 years has shown us that the early years environment is a perfect environment to introduce children to important concepts about STEM in play-based and intentional ways. And the purpose of this session is to pick up some of the new emphasis in the new version of the EYLF around intentional teaching. And we want to connect that intentional teaching with STEM. So I'll hand over to Tracy. Will sort of do this tag team. Tracy will talk for a bit, I'll talk for a bit, and Ross will indicate if there's any questions that are coming up in the chat. Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks, Kevin. Ross, if you'd like to jump on the first bubble. So here at ELSA, we've worked across our workshops with over 100 educators, and we've confirmed what we sort of already knew already, and that is that you as educators are the critical component in supporting children's STEM learning. And so we want to build on what you're already doing in your centres. And over the next few slides in our Prezi, we'll briefly discuss what we think STEM is and why it's important. So with science, generally stands for science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And the acronym is meant to indicate that these disciplines can be integrated. But we think a little bit differently about to many, and we've discussed this in our first webinar if you happen to catch it. If you didn't, there is a recording available from our website, I think. Ross, please nod in agreement. Thank you. But in brief, we think that STEM should be about being a STEM practitioner and doing STEM rather than only learning about the content of the 4 disciplines. So in the next little bit, we want to value add to what you're already doing by proposing a way to plan for intentional teaching and opportunities for STEM learning. The next one, please, Ross. So why is STEM important? We think it's important to be introduced very early in preschool because it helps them to understand their world, how their world works, helps them to develop positive dispositions towards STEM and those sorts of careers and areas for learning. It can translate to confidence and success within STEM subjects at school. And we are actually thinking that we need to prepare our students and our children for jobs of the future, those which may not even exist yet. So we're going to take the next look. The next thing we're going to look at is the EYLF and what that has to say about STEM. So back to you, Kev.
Thanks, Tracy. Yep. So the next 3 slides, we want to focus on the changes to the new EYLF, or changes to the EYLF that we think are pertinent to STEM. Now, there are obviously changes to the EYLF more broadly, but we're just focusing on STEM today. And the main ones that we sort of see that can easily tie back to STEM. There's that greater emphasis now on sustainability. In the new version 2, there's an emphasis on dispositions. Now, in ELSA, we talk about ideas, methods, and values, but they're very similar to dispositions. And as Tracy mentioned, we spent about half an hour on that in our last webinar. So jump on and have a look at that if you would like to. There's a stronger emphasis on multimodal play, and that ties in nicely with some of the digital aspects that we think are important in early years STEM. There's a greater emphasis on a couple of types of assessment, which I'll talk about later. There's a focus on conceptual thinking in maths and science. So you can see that's an obvious relation to STEM. And importantly, there's a stronger emphasis on Indigenous perspectives. And there's quite a lot that we can learn about the environment in particular, following Indigenous perspectives. And for us, the focus is today on that strengthened emphasis on play-based learning and intentionality. So we'll get to that in a couple of bubbles. Thanks, Ross. So in terms of STEM and EYLF outcomes, in our view at least, most reference to STEM learning happens in that outcome 4, and that's where it was in the previous version. There's that focus on developing a growth mindset. So that sits comfortably with our idea that children are learners and can learn STEM. Learning and thinking processes, that conceptual thinking I mentioned, more broadly in STEM, but specifically mentioned in science and mathematics in outcome 4. And then in outcome 5, but related to what I've just been saying, is that overarching building numeracy. So those are the key points from outcome 4, but we also see some connectivity back to STEM in outcome 2 and outcome 5, where they're talking about digital technologies and how important it is that young children are comfortable with digital technologies, certainly not overusing them, but comfortable in using them to communicate and understand their world. So outcomes 2 and 5. Thanks, Ross. So we get at this notion of assessment, and as I mentioned, version 2 now notes 3 types of assessment: that for learning, that formative, as children are playing and learning. There's a sense that now there's opportunities for some summative learning, so perhaps preparing the transition statements into foundation. And importantly, they're encouraging you now as educators to give children opportunity to self-assess their own learning and their thinking and their approach to play and their approach to their peers, etc., etc. Now, the EYLF, and we agree, thinks that these types of assessment are best done in play-based natural ways. So we're certainly not advocating, and we strongly advocate the other way about not bringing school back to preschool. We want to see the learning that happens in preschool influence what happens in foundation. So in our programs, we get at what children have been learning through I can statements. And these are evaluated as children are naturally playing the games in the program. So, for instance, there would be I can statements about I can create a pattern, I can select materials to complete a task, I can use positional language, I can identify where a photograph has been taken from, etc., etc. So it's very much around what children can do. In the program, this information is then conveyed back to you as educators. So you get a dashboard for you to easily see how children are going. So we think the focus on assessment in the EYLF gets it about right with that mixture of formative, summative, and self-assessment. I think I hand back over to Tracy now.
Thanks, Kevin. So I guess Kevin's sort of given an overview of how STEM is now promoted within the new EYLF. And as he said, there is a bit more of a focus on the intentional teaching aspect within preschool. And so just within the STEM focus, we just wanted to have a look at what that might mean for your teaching practice and give some examples. And I'm sure, given that you guys are the experts, that you can think of a lot more, but just sort of highlighting a few for you as we go. So what is this idea of intentional teaching? I'm sure you all have your own ideas. As we said, there is a focus in the EYLF version 2 of the intentional role of both children and their educators to engage, extend and enrich learning. You're encouraged in the new EYLF across all aspects of your work to act deliberately, thoughtfully and purposefully to support children's learning through play. And so that means you're encouraged to take an active role in planning and practice, but still being responsive to those spontaneous opportunities as they arrive through the play. We're going to suggest our approach to intentionality later in this presentation with Kevin. But of course, we understand that we want the play to drive the learning. And so it doesn't mean that all of the learning experiences are explicitly planned like they would be in a school-based environment. Educators are still encouraged to recognise and utilise those opportunities for spontaneous teaching and that learning based on children's play. Thanks, Ross. So we're just going to give a little example here. So within one of the ELSA apps, there is an activity that's called Let's Tinker with Spare Parts. And the children experiment with different recyclable materials, sorry, it's Friday, to move water from the tank to the vegetable patch to help and then the vegetables grow if they're able to make that connection. And there are various other freely available type activities out there as well. And so if the children have had an opportunity to play this activity in the digital space, they're now very interested in creating ways for water to move from one spot to another. So the intentionality of this teaching could be actually creating an environment within the sandpit with materials that encourage children to build a path that allows water to flow from one spot to another. Now, depending upon where your tap is in relation to your sandpit, that could be quite a complex operation. So the idea is to really think about, okay, they've learnt some things and been shown interest in this. How can I put out provocations that then build on that idea and those experiences? Thanks, Ross. So ideas for intentionality in play-based STEM experiences. Some of our suggestions include extending and challenging children's ideas through shared thinking and think alouds. So for example, if children are constructing a car ramp out of blocks and you happen to be working with them or engaging with them, share your thinking such as, oh, I notice that when the ramp is higher, the cars go faster. Do you think we should put another larger block under the ramp and see what happens to the cars? So just building that, the way we engage and being very intentional about the learning that we want children to undertake through their play. Support children's progress through open-ended questions that support their guided self-discoveries. So an example of this may be perhaps when children are sorting objects into different categories aligned with one attribute, such as colour. You could ask an open-ended question like, I wonder what other ways we can sort these materials. And the last sort of suggestion that we have around this is joining in children's play by taking an active role where you can model concepts or physical demonstrations. So for example, you might have children that are really interested in all the birds that might come into your playground, an outside area. And if you put some binoculars in the outdoor environment, they may or may not know how to use those. And so you can join in their play as bird watchers and demonstrate how to use those binoculars correctly, with the children then being able to learn from you and you're modelling that behaviour. think it's back to you now, Kev. Thanks.
Thanks, Tracy. So this next bubble, we'd like to suggest a play-based way that we think that you can support children's learning. And this is the approach that we use in the ELSA project, but we think it's more broadly applicable than just the ELSA project. So we use what we call the ERA approach. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out the E stands for something, the R stands for something, and the A stands for something. So the E stands for experience. So anytime that you're working with children, you'll start from what they know and you'll build on from an experience they've had or something that they've brought to the centre using familiar language. And in the ELSA program, this happens in a non-digital way. Then we think that children to further develop the conceptual understanding need to represent that experience in some way. So I recently became a story park granddad, and something came across my phone yesterday morning where the children were drawing maps. A child had come to the centre with some fancy pajamas that had skulls on, and so they started drawing treasure maps, and they could represent their understanding of maps in a pictorial way. Now, that could be done digitally. In this case, it was done just through drawing, but it's that important representation of that thinking. Excuse me. And then there should be an opportunity then to apply that learning in another context. And so the educator then got the children to be drawing maps of the centre. All right, so it was an experience the child bought, represented it in a pirate map, and then they were drawing maps of their centre. And you can see lots of opportunity for STEM-related things there: scale, how big is the island, what sort of plants, animals are on the island, etc., etc., etc. Thanks, Ross. So in the ELSA program, we do quite a bit of work with patterning. We think patterning is a very important skill. And so in an ERA loop to do with patterning, it would be, children identify a pattern in the environment or a pattern in their clothing, and they do activities around that. They can then represent the patterns. In ELSA, they can do that digitally, but again, you can do that non-digitally through drawings, and then they'll apply that patterning in a different context. So, for example, children might have generated a simple A-B pattern, what we say, triangle, circle, triangle, circle, triangle, circle, etc. They can draw that pattern, but then they translate that pattern into another form. So triangle, circle might become clap, hand on head, clap, hand on head. So it's a drawn pattern that's moved to a movement pattern. But we think you should always try to look for that opportunity to build on an experience that the child's had, or in an intentional way to provide an opportunity for an experience, represent that in some way, and then apply it in another context. Thanks, Ross. And as Tracy mentioned right back at the start, and we mean this sincerely, you are the important person in the room in terms of supporting children's play. And so the ELSA program supports you in that work. Now, rather than me explaining any more about that, Ross has a short video from Luke Carroll, who's our ELSA ambassador, that talks about how you can be intentional in your work with children and STEM.
Hi, ELSA educators. My name is Luke, and I've recently come on board with the ELSA team to help share some of the wonderful work you've been doing in the wider community. I've loved hearing about how you use ELSA in your preschools and how the children have engaged with STEM learning. ELSA educators are an incredibly important part of ELSA, and we value your expertise, your understanding of the children in your care, and your professionalism. So what does it mean to be an ELSA educator? We know you are more than likely already engaging with STEM activities in your preschool. Using the ELSA program will help you notice and understand how you can enhance STEM opportunities for the children in your care. As an ELSA educator, you will have access to the ELSA program, which includes both on-app activities and off-app activities. The on-app activities are available to children in the year before formal school and are a fun, engaging way for children to learn about STEM-based concepts. For example, in the app Patterns and Relationships, children come together to represent their learning through a dance the whole class can enjoy. Across the suite of apps, children can play with their friends or individually. The apps sit as one part of the larger program. The ELSA Educator app outlines activities you can do with children before using the app to experience concepts, and after using the app to apply concepts explored more broadly. Previous ELSA educators have commented on how valuable the educator training has been. The training seeks to extend your current understanding of STEM and provide background knowledge of how the apps and program came to life. There are opportunities for face-to-face training as well as some online engagements. We love to hear ideas and experiences too. You will have the chance to connect with ourselves and other ELSA educators, both face-to-face and online. Although being familiar with the device you are using will make things easier for you, the ELSA team is here to help should you get stuck or need a hand. We have a range of resources to help you get started and are only a phone call away. ELSA would not be the success it is without our enthusiastic educators. Welcome to the team.
Thanks, Ross. My internet hamster must have been a little bit slow up here, so it was a bit dropping out for me. Hopefully the video was okay for you. So I'd like to hand back over to Tracy. Tracy, I think there are some questions in the chat that we might address, but now's a couple of minutes. If you have a question, feel free to flick on the microphone and ask. But Tracy, I'll let you have a look at that chat first.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so I think lots of them were just asking about the availability of the content that we've presented today, so the slides and the link to the video. So they will be available from Monday via our website, and Ross can share the link to the website in the chat now for you. But we also have, we can show you the contact us at the end. So what would you like to know more about? Is there anything from this presentation in particular or within future presentations that we might be able to address? Or about the ELSA team and what we do and who we are? Is there any particular questions that we've probably got about 5 or 7 minutes to have a chat with you guys if there's anything you'd like to know? And feel free, I think, Ross, you can turn your mic on and ask a question, I think, as well.
I hope so. We'll have a
look. The ELSA resources, they're not free at the moment. It is a paid resource, but please check out the website. It's not overly expensive. We do a per room charge. So if you have a preschool room within your centre, then it's a standard charge regardless of how many children are using the program across the week. So, yeah. Oh, thank you. That's lovely feedback about your preschool enjoying the learning journey with ELSA. That's lovely to hear. Thank you. Emma, I think that there is a possibility for us to work with family daycares. I think it's probably a matter of asking our team directly via an email or giving us a call. Ross, can you correct me if I'm wrong on that one?
Yeah, that's correct. There's for centres and preschools with less than 10 children, I believe there's a different offering. So if you want to email us at team@elsa.edu.au, we can answer any questions you have.
Yeah.
I've just popped the link into the ELSA program website. It's a page where we're going to add all of our webinar recordings for each month. So this one will be up after 1 p.m. on Monday. So there'll be a recording of this as well as the slides that you saw today in PDF form.
And Jennifer's just asked in the Q&A, how do we do each assessment that is under the EYLF? So that might be something we can think about for future presentations in terms of the assessment for, I think that's what you mean, Jennifer. We can absolutely do a webinar, perhaps providing some professional learning around those different types of assessments and what that might look like in preschool. I think that's something we would definitely take on board as an opportunity to help out.
Yeah, so at the moment, Jennifer, each of the activities is mapped back to one of the 5 outcomes. And so that gives you some confidence that as children are playing, they're meeting some of the requirements of the EYLF. But as Tracy said, the ICANN statements are more global in terms of their learning. It would be something that we could certainly address, though, to look more carefully at formative or summative assessment. Yeah.
And Azza has just asked how we can become part of the ELSA team. We'd love to have you on board as definitely. Please reach out via the email and have a chat to us. That's definitely something we would consider taking on board. We're always looking for people to help us across the ELSA program.
I think that's
all right. So, we might just finish up. We've got a couple of minutes. Yeah.
So, just to wrap up, we'd like to firstly thank you for giving up some of your valuable time to come and have a chat with us today and listen to what we're doing in the STEM space. We hope we've shown you some ways that you can be more intentional. Very importantly, they're still in that play-based way in your STEM teaching. We have, as Ross has indicated, we're repeating this again on Monday, but there'll be three further different presentations sort of throughout the year. I think the next one's going to be on how to be using literature to support your work with STEM. So that's one to look out for. I mentioned before a recent Story Park Dad. So personally, I'd like to thank you, for all the work that you do for our young people, and I'm sure Tracy and Ross feel the same way. We think that you're the most important educators. You get the kids off to a great start. So thank you for that work you do for our young citizens. Feel free though to also visit that ELSA website. So it's full of the high quality STEM resources that can support your teaching. Unless Tracy or Ross have anything to add, I think we might sign off. I wish you all, wherever you are, a wonderful and restful weekend. So thanks for joining us today. Bye.